Good morning, everybody. I got my saffron coffee, and Prince Nana is going to be jealous because I just finished this. But tomorrow I'm going to go to AEW Forbidden Door, and what AEW Forbidden Door is that it's a pay-per-view, and it's supposed to be where AEW wrestlers from other companies. So you're supposed to see New Japan Pro Wrestling wrestlers, supposed to see CMLL wrestlers from Mexico City, Stardom wrestlers from Japan. This is usually like a great exhibition because when we think of professional wrestling companies, a lot of companies just stick with their rosters. So it's good that we have promotions that are like, hey, we're gonna just intertwine things and just put like dream matches together. But this show is definitely riddled with many controversies. Like Forbidden Door has been very controversial for many years, and the main controversies of Forbidden Door is really like it's a filler show, because if you're gonna have like two wrestlers from other companies face each other, how are you progressing a story in your company? And then also, like 2 months from now is All In, the biggest show of the year. So shouldn't you be more focused on building matches to your biggest show, not trying to do a dream match show? And also the other thing too is that what usually happens is that if wrestlers do a great job at Forbidden Door, that AEW contract is going to come up really. So there's companies like New Japan Pro Wrestling that is missing a lot of talents because a lot of them has either gone to WWE or AEW. This year there is actually a lot of controversies, and I think it's important to talk about a majority of them, not all of them. I think the first controversy is that this is a very loaded weekend. Like the WWE has a show, Combat Zone Wrestling has a show, TNA Wrestling has a show, AEW has a show, and I think there's also a few other promotions that have shows this weekend. So the problem is that there may be people who have wrestling fatigue or feel like, oh, well, all these companies are a big cash grab. The second controversy that's really big is Yota Tsuji, the IWGP champion, the heavyweight champion, New Japan Professional Wrestling, doesn't want to be on the show because he's not traditionally liked how the IWGP Championship has been defended. Usually doesn't main event the show. People would say that a great main event would be the New Japan Professional Wrestling Champion versus the AEW Champion, but they've never done anything like that. And a few years ago, they had Jack Perry, who's like a cruiserweight type of wrestle for the IWGP Championship. And many times that's not even main event to the show, or it's been like the penultimate match. So, if you're gonna defend somebody's title, you have to make sure that title is respected, really. And if it's not respected, pearls before swine. So there's a lot of people who respect Yota Tsuji's decision. And I think like a final controversy as well is that there are many promotions that don't want to work with AEW because they kind of feel that usually what happens is a lot of times their wrestlers lose, really. So, you look at a match like, Kenny Omega versus Zack Sabre Jr. There's a lot of talk of Kenny Omega facing Will Ospreay at All In, so we kind of know who's going to win that one. You have Tekla versus Starlight Kid. We know that you're not going to take the AEW Women's Championship and give it to somebody and that person's going to be defending it in Japan for a couple of months when you're trying to build up to All In. With that said, there are definitely many matches I want to see. I would say I want to see a majority of the match. The Young Bucks, El Sky Team, and the Unbound Company, because El Sky Team has my boy Mascara Dorada. In my opinion, he's the greatest wrestler right now, really, because he's an underdog. He puts on such a great performance. He goes a long duration. And he just has a really cool look, really. He looks like a badass version of the Yellow Ranger. One of the greatest matches I've ever seen was Bandito versus Mascara Dorada, ROH Championship in Mexico City. Like, that made me a fan of Bandito and both Mascara Dorada in the same night. So seeing my boy Mascara Dorada kick some ass and take some names, it's gonna be, that's worth this entire trip, bitches. I want to see Tekla versus Starlight Kid. I really appreciate what Tekla's doing to Stardom. Tekla's really going out of her way to be the biggest asshole in the world to Stardom. And that's really what the story is about, really. Like, what are you going to do about it? Because Tekla keeps disrespecting Stardom. And I think for a lot of women wrestlers on the AEW roster, there's a huge problem with them not really being booked really well, not a lot of good stories being told, or they have a personality, but they don't have a lot of opportunities to really elevate their personality. Like last year, It was last year. You saw Thunder Rosa have a Day of Dead match. Yeah, she loves her Mexican culture, but with Tekla, her character is just really an asshole, a badass, a rule breaker, and you're kind of really seeing that. So I really respect Tekla for putting in a lot of work. Really, Starlight Kid. Yes, she looks cute in that like white tiger mask. That's all I gotta say. Really. Next match is Mercedes versus Maya World. Very controversial match. Anybody who wrestles Mercedes definitely gets elevated in a lot of great ways, really. And I think one of the big controversies of this show is what you're going to do with Maya World, because there's two things you can do. Three things you can do. You can have Maya World lose, and then you can do Maya World versus Athena and build towards that. Have Maya World take the ROH Championship off of Athena, and have Athena go to the main roster because they have to do something different. You could have Maya World lose, and then she's in irrelevancy, and that's usually what AEW does. Or you, and then also, and also the other thing too is you can have Mercedes win, and a lot of people will say good for her. Tekla versus Mercedes is the big money match for All In. Or people could say, hey, this is just bad because Mercedes gets a lot of pull. So Maya World beats Athena, but now we're getting into a situation where Mercedes never loses, where she's always going to be booked she's always going to be booked strongly, but nobody else is. So it feels like double standards for Mercedes, really. And then the other thing too is, as people said about Maya World, is that so most people don't know who she is. Most people don't even know that she has had a lot of really great matches, or she's kind of like a rival to Athena, because most people don't watch ROH really. So and her brother passed away, unfortunately. So a lot of people say, hey, she's in that spot for sympathy points. So it'll be really interesting to see what they do, but really they have to make it look like Maya World is. They have to make Maya World a star in this, and it doesn't mean that she has to win to be a star. It means that she has to give everything. They have to do consistent booking and saying, hey, let's build another star. Tekla built herself up this year. Let's make Maya World somebody who builds herself up, because we need more. And then the next match is Kenny Omega versus Zack Sabre Jr. I do want to see this match because Kenny Omega's gone to the career renaissance. This is kind of like his swan song a little bit, just like with Dan O'Brien in his last year of full-time wrestling. That I feel like Omega's just giving everything that he got, really. And I think you're going to see that, because really there's one thing that people are talking about, is that who's it going to be? It's going to be Ospreay versus Omega at All In, or MJF versus Will Ospreay. And that's why I think that Omega's going to win, because you can do Ospreay, you can do Omega versus MJF Part 2 in Montreal, and then you can do something like an hour-long match, or because I know like Okada MJF was an hour-long match in Tokyo, so they can kind of do an hour-long match of Kenny Omega versus MJF, and the winner of all that is going to face Ospreay at Wembley Stadium. So I think for Redemption, you need to have Omega win this match, which is very predictable, but that tells the most interesting story. But you're going to see Omega and Zack Sabre Jr. give each other everything that they fucking have, really. And speaking of which, William motherfucking Ospreay and Swerve motherfucking Strickland and my nigga for life, Prince Nana. So we're gonna see those guys face each other. Will Ospreay versus Swerve Strickland. I was lucky enough to see their first match at the UBS Arena in Long Island. They stole the show. I was jumping up and down like I was on crack, really. It was excellent first time. To see the second match that these motherfuckers do, it's gonna be awesome. And the main event of this show is going to be Team Briscoe versus Team MJF. Controversial match for many reasons. But this is a match I do want to see because I know it's going to be violent. I know it's going to be edgy. I like carnage, fuckery, and chaos, and off-the-wall bullshit. So I'm really excited to just, go to the show, tell you guys how it is. And then also, as I review it, I'm going to, talk about a couple of things. Is the show worth it? To me, worth the money that I spent, my grade for the show, and also, the pros and cons and the improvements. So definitely, there is a lot to talk about the show going into it, and coming out of it, there is a lot to talk about it as well.
Riders on the storm, Into this house we're born, into this world we're thrown, like a dog without a bone, an actor out alone, riders on the storm. There's a killer on the road, his brain is squirming like a toad. Take a long holiday, let your children play. If you give this man a ride, sweet family will die. Killer on the road, yeah.
Before I went to AEW Forbidden Door, I spent a couple of days in San Francisco. And the first thing that I did in San Francisco is that I got up early and I walked across the Golden Gate Bridge. And I thought that I wasn't able to make it this time, but I was able to walk the whole entire distance. It's definitely very intimidating for a lot of reasons. That, it's very windy up there. There is a lot of fog. There's also a lot of people as well, really. And there's also a lot of people on bicycles. So they may clip you, they may be honking their horns. And then also there's a lot of traffic. So every single time a car drives by, there's a loud boom or bump from hitting speed bumps. And then also too, there is, just hearing the shockwave of cars and vibration. At Japantown, I went to my favorite ramen place, Maru Fuku Ramen. They have this soda where it's in a bag that actually glows multiple colors. So it was definitely really cool just to be drinking, peach soda and then also leche soda. And then I got my ramen and it was definitely very delicious. And it's the tonkatsu ramen. That's kind of the very standard one. It had a nice big egg in it. Really good pork broth. I was really enjoying myself there. And then after that, I went to the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, and they had a couple of Henry Matisse paintings. And, he's a Fauvism artist. And for those who don't know what Fauvism is that back in the late 1800s, there were artists that experimented with using lots and lots of colors in pictures. And there was a lot of people who said that, hey, that's not art really, because art should look more or realistic. When you see paintings of Napoleon, you see a very realistic looking piece of art, really. But when you have people who have just super colorful paintings, people just say, hey, that's just low class, or that's just, not art even. But it's good that we live in a time nowadays where all art styles are respected. And I went on another floor and I saw, some Andy Warhol work, and, he's one of my favorite artists. Then I went on another floor and I saw Anselm Kiefer. He was an artist. After World War II. And he really was showing people, it was really capturing the experience that people felt in Germany after World War II. Being afraid because, the U.S. and the Soviet Union were occupying parts of Germany. Families were separated by the Berlin Wall. And there was also William Kentridge, who he worked with with paper, animations, drawing and erasing drawings and everything like that, really. He's also was an artist during apartheid in South Africa. So his work definitely really shows, just a lot of the violence that happened during apartheid. And, also his work, his animated films are very unsettling as well, really, because you always hear, these really weird songs and these sound effects. So he's definitely an artist that I'm very inspired by. And after all of that, I went to Alcatraz, and that was definitely one of the biggest highlights of my trip. And, it was definitely very, very eerie, because when I took the boat ride to Alcatraz, there were so many clouds in the sky,
except on Alcatraz. So it almost felt like it had like a halo, like it looked really glowing. And then also, I took a lot of really beautiful pictures because there was great composition. The seagulls in the right place in the sky. It was really cloudy and like the water really stood out as well. Really, like it was definitely very atmospheric. I went inside, the building, and I learned a lot about Alcatraz. Like the first thing that I will say is that it was a fort, but then it became a prison. And then there was an uprising in Alcatraz, and the United States government, they actually dropped grenades in the building to just scare off the prisoners. And one of the riots that happened was over how spaghetti was always like overly served there. And there was Machine Gun Kelly was there, and Al Capone was there. He was probably the most famous resident. And the Birdman at Alcatraz, he was a infamous murderer. And there was a lot of other people there. And like what Alcatraz was, and a lot of people don't realize, is that it wasn't for prisoners. It was for people who kept getting in lots of trouble in prison. Instead of going to the hole, they would just be transferred to Alcatraz. Like, this is like the worst of the worst, really. When I first was walking around there, a lot of people were looking around because it looked like there was a fight that was going on. Like, you heard people screaming and yelling, and a lot of just like banging and clanging, really. And then it just came out of nowhere, really. It's like, where did this come from? And then, I went inside some of the cells, and I kind of thought to myself a little bit about my life because I've made some bad choices. I've almost ended up in jail. So I kind of said, wow, I really appreciate my freedom, because, these cells are kind of like really disgusting. But again, it made me really think about saying, man, I've worked really hard to turn my life around so I don't end up in a place like this. Like freedom is very beautiful and very powerful, really. But again, we make the choices to have freedom or take away our freedom.
So I want to say AEW Forbidden Door. This is like the best, Forbidden Door that they've ever done. And really, AEW has been having really great momentum this year. Like, Dynasty was like the best one I've ever seen. And also like with Double or Nothing. And, I really like the show a lot because I think one of the biggest things that I appreciate about AEW is if they make improvements. Like, honestly, like Tekla versus Starlight Kid was my favorite match. And, Starlight Kid should have matches in AEW. And, it's one of the best women's matches, or the best women's match I've seen from AEW, in my opinion, because I really just liked how Tekla just kept on going, and she kept on, just delivering. There were many other matches that I liked. I liked Bandito versus John Moxley. I liked the match that Pac had with Shota Umino. And Swerve versus Will Ospreay was legendary. But it went on for a little too long. I also liked the steel cage match. I'm not into like the campy humor of Orange Cassidy, but sometimes it gets me laughing. Sometimes it just gets to me, and I think that that's okay, really. I think you've kind of established enough with Orange Cassidy that he is a bit of a comedy character. So sometimes, even though I'm not into that type of thing, he just has a way of being so outrageous and surprising that always seems to get my goat, really. Maya World became a star tonight. And that's also something I want to see out of the women's division in AEW, is that I want to see women become stars. I want to see new stars. Like Tekla became a star this year. Also, Maya World has become a star. So I want to see more of that. And there's a couple of other matches that I'm going to talk about once I get back to my hotel. But overall, really great show. Outstanding. I really, really enjoyed it. So guys, I want to review AEW Forbidden Door, and I'm going to start by just talking about the matches that I liked. And the first of those matches is the Young Bucks, El Sky Team, and Unbound Company. And the big issue with this is that this is what we call a regular Young Bucks match, where it's flippy, it's counters, it's action-packed, high tempo, but it does run into that same issue where it's almost like,
a lot of people are looking at this match and they're like, what the hell are the rules? Like, who is in and out of the match? But, and I think that this is kind of be one thing to say about AEW is that I think that with AEW, they kind of, I think with some wrestlers, they don't improve. They just do what they do. And I think with the Young Bucks, they're exactly like that. Like, they're good with flips and kicks. Whenever they have matches with, like, luchadors and other people, there's going to be, like, that sense of, like, what the hell is going on? Who's legal, who's not legal? Why isn't the referee maintaining order? Like, this has just been so consistent with the Young Bucks match that you have to say, hey, I'm just not going to care about it anymore because they're not going to improve. From that. It does hurt their matches, but I was very, very well entertained. And, Mascara Dorada did stand out a lot. Mystico did stand out. The Young Bucks did win, which surprised me because I don't think anybody from CMLL won tonight. And that's not good because it's just saying, oh, well, they're the loser team or they're the loser company. So the next match on the card is Kenny Omega versus Zack Sabre Jr., and I was a little confused, and a lot of people were very confused about this match. Like, why was it placed second on the card and on the main show? So I think it was because they were trying to create uncertainty in the audience. Like, is Kenny Omega going to come out at the end of the night? Because is he going to try to set up redemption, or is he going to congratulate Ospreay as well? Like, is he going to come out at the end of the night, and what is he going to do, really? So I think that's why, the match was very early on, is because a lot of people thought it was going to play into Ospreay versus Swerve, but Kenny Omega, you didn't see him for the rest of the night, really. And, it was a good match. There was a lot of grappling and holds and going a long duration. Like, kind of like the thing with AEW. Like, they are masters of knowing how to go a very long duration in professional wrestling and have it very entertaining, really. But it was definitely, Kenny Omega giving his best. Great offense, great counters by both of them. There were some spots where they were outside the ring, and I felt they did that for a little too long of a time, really. Because, again, this is a regular match. This is like no DQ, really. So I do think that there was overusing of there was way overusing of being outside the ring in that match. The next match I liked was Shota Umino versus Pac. This was one of the matches that I thought I was not going to look forward to, but Pac is a really great wrestler because his whole style is that he's a bastard, so he's going to hit you extremely hard. He's going to cause a lot of pain, but like the way he threw Shota Umino into the ring post and slammed him around or did moves that looked very freaking brutal, it was definitely very like appropriate for his character. And like I said, I think I agree with a lot of people that I think that Pac is one of the most underrated wrestlers because he could be the ROH champion or he could even be the AEW champion, but it just comes down to very bad booking. Like, he needs to be more than like Moxley's lackey, really. Like, I think that he puts on a lot of great performances. Obviously, he lost because Shota Umino is holding a championship, and they didn't want a title change. And I think that was also one of the big problems with the show. Like, I don't think they didn't have a title change on the show, and a lot of it was because it was going to be people who were going to have matches at All In, and you kind of know what matches certain people are going to have, but also too, like, people just don't want to bring titles to other companies. So that's why, like I said earlier, one of the criticisms of the show was that it's very predictable. And speaking of which, that I think my match of the night, like the match that I liked the most, was Tekla versus Starlight Kid. Like, because I've never really given Tekla a chance. Like, sometimes I watched, or I remember, like, how the last pay-per-view at Double or Nothing, like that, she was kind of the bathroom break match. But I think that one thing that really helped out was that she kept just being this big asshole to Stardom. And this is kind of why we say with the women's division, you need to make the women matter on television. Like, with all the stuff that Tekla did, made me care a lot about, Starlight Kid, made me care a lot about Tekla, made me care a lot about, like, how she was bullying Okada, and really the story was, like, is Starlight Kid going to beat the bully, really? And there were some points where I said to myself, the Starlight Kid is doing so much, like, offense and submission holds, and Tekla's having such a hard time. I think part of me felt like it suspended my disbelief. I actually felt that maybe Starlight Kid was going to win, but the predictable thing happens. You're not going to have, Tekla lose because Starlight Kid versus Maya World, Starlight Kid versus Mercedes Moné is not the big money match. It is Tekla. People know who Tekla is because she's been wrestling on AEW for many months, really. And she's been champion for, like, maybe over half a year, really. Why would you give it to somebody that nobody knows about, really? But it was a really great match. Starlight Kid really should have more matches in AEW. Like, she has the ability to use a lot of submission holds. They both went a while. They hit each other with everything, really, and they just kept on going and going and going and going, really. And I think that that's kind of, and as I said, I think that's what AEW does well, really, is that, and I'm looking at all matches on my laptop. I think that a majority of the matches were over 16 minutes, like, and there were 2 matches that were over like 30 minutes. The other thing I want to mention is that, as I said, like, I think that the longer matches worked for the show because there are some wrestlers you didn't know about, and they really need to show, hey, this wrestler, this is a big moment for this wrestler, for Starlight Kid to win the title, put Tekla in her place. This is why the match is going that long, really. So I felt that it was appropriate. Another match that I liked was Mercedes versus Maya World. Me and Russell Toddy have had some conversations about this. I really wanted Maya World to win because I kind of was saying to myself, it's a bad look if Mercedes wins because Athena lost to Maya World, really. So it's almost like, well, now Mercedes can't lose to anybody. Like, Mercedes gets the privileged treatment. But the other thing that I agree with is that I think that that the two matches they should have is Mercedes Moné versus Tekla. That's the big money match at All In. Maya World versus Athena at Death Before Dishonor this year when she becomes like I think a 4-year champion. That should be when they take the title when they put the title on Maya World and they move Athena to the main roster because I think it's to a point where Maya World needs to be groomed to take the ROH title off of Athena. Because you can't just always have Athena as the ROH champion. So I think that that's important. But the match was really, really good. Unfortunately for Maya World, she had a wardrobe malfunction. But when she wrestled, she did a hell of a job. Really, Mercedes was hitting her with everything. Maya World was like, just kicking out. Really, like this really meant a lot to her. So they both went for a very long duration, big move after big move, and it was definitely something that I really enjoyed. It made Maya World a star, but we got to kind of say, what are they going to do the next, 6 months with Maya World? Is she going to be a one-hit wonder? Are they going to, say, sit at home for a while and do nothing with that momentum? Or are they actually going to, push her and, find a good direction for her? The other match that happened tonight was Team Briscoe versus Team MJF in the steel cage match. And I do have many feelings about this. I did think that I was very happy they did not make this the main event, because I think that you really want the main event to be one of two things: either a match with a foreign promotion versus AEW, or an open heart tournament match. You have to have something that I think feels the most appropriate. The next thing is that I've said this many times, and I'm congratulate AEW for this. You cannot have a death match stipulation at the end of every single show. The closing match should not be a death match, because the problem is that, again, am I watching Combat Zone Wrestling or am I watching AEW? Am I watching Frontier Martial Arts Wrestling or am I watching AEW? So I was happy that this was the penultimate match. There was a lot of crazy spots in this match. There was a spot where Kyle Fletcher was bleeding and they poured orange, squeezed orange into, I don't want to say orange juice, but squeezed orange into his wounds. Kevin Knight takes the wrong backpack There was an explosion. He goes through some tables. They had a thumbtack spot. They also had a spot with tables. And also, too, Leo Rush was in one of the bags. And the other issue, I think, with this match was that I was not happy with Takeshita. Like, he and Okada did stuff, but you didn't see Takeshita use weapons. It was almost like Takeshita was being Takeshita, and that's not what you do in a steel cage match. Like, if he and Okada were on a team and they were competing in blood and guts, they would be using weapons. That would be a most appropriate, really. You don't take somebody like Takeshita and he's doing what he does best, really. He has to kind of say, hey, I'm in a different situation. If it's a weapons match, he has to use a weapon. He can't just do something like use a blue thunder bomb, someone through a bunch of tables. That's not enough for me. Like, he had to use a weapon or bleed or blade or whatever. He really had to do a lot more than what he did, really. So I felt that was a bit of a letdown. But I also feel what was controversial about this match is like what I always say is that AEW has an issue with 48-hour film project comedy, which is dumb, silly comedy where
Safety first, safety first, safety first, safety first, safety first.
I think that some people laugh at, but it's just stupid comedy. But this match did have a bunch of stupid comedy in it. Like, you had them, you thought you were getting a weapon, and then, oranges get picked out. You thought you were getting a weapon, and then Takeshita gives Okada the middle finger. There was a spot where people were getting hit in the dick. There were spots where there are other like comedy spots as well, really. Like Orange Cassidy's trying to do the comedy kicks, as I call it, on MJF, really. But as I said, really, I think that with AEW, like I laughed, I guffawed, I was into it. So it really was something where, maybe at home I wouldn't have enjoyed it, but I did seem to enjoy it. But overall, I was surprised that Mark Briscoe's team did win, but I felt that was a very bad option because I think that, like I said, the Don Callis family usually loses a lot, and it's almost like what we say, if there's a Tony Khan favorite going up against the Don Callis family is going to lose. So it is what it is. I don't remember who got pinned, but I think it was MJF, and that's also bad in a way because he got squashed twice this year, and now he got a pinfall in a major match. So I think that, like I said, he's kind of losing a little bit of his luster. Like, you look at somebody like Roman Reigns, where he very rarely gets pinned, but when he gets pinned, it means something. I think with MJF, he's kind of the same way, where pinning him could mean something very big and significant. But I think that there are times when he's tolerated way too many squashes and other things like that. I think that there's a certain point where he needs to kind of really protect how many times he gets pinned or loses something. And the main event match was Will Ospreay versus Score Strickland. This was like outstanding, one of the greatest matches I've ever seen. definitely, there were some ups and downs to this match. I think the first thing about this match was that it went a very long duration, but a lot of people were a little upset. There's some people who actually walked out towards the end because they felt it was running on way too long. The other issue is that I'm in California, so this ended around 10 p.m. for me, but on the West Coast, on the East Coast, this would have ended at 1 a.m. And if they actually had this show in either in New Jersey, Philadelphia, New York City, they wouldn't run this late because they would say, hey, you know what, there might be summer school, there be people getting to jobs, it's just way too late really, or people have to get the subway back wherever really, but the point of it is, I felt that this match was way too long, and it shows AEW's issue of just everything has to be super long really. And then there were some things that didn't look realistic. Like towards the end, you saw like Swerve get kicked in the head. You saw Will Ospreay get kicked in the head, and he wasn't like really knocked down. He kept on going and going, and that was kind of the issue of this match. I think it kept on going and going. I think the big problem that AEW has to understand is that sometimes going and going, or wrestlers digging down just into like some, inner strength and stuff like that. Sometimes that can be a good thing. Sometimes that can be a bad thing. But I think they overused that tonight, really. Wrestlers just like, oh, well, this is a big moment for me, so I'm gonna have like some Super Saiyan level of endurance really. But they did a lot of really great stuff. They did a lot of good moves in this, a lot of counters, a lot of flow, and it was also a very bloody match, and I was kind of a little like bothered by it because it was way bloodier than any other match in the show. There were 3 bloody matches. There was Jon Moxley versus Bandito. There was the steel cage match in this match, but this match was super bloody. And also, I think another thing I was concerned about was that you had the Death Riders come out and cheer on Ospreay, and I felt like, I think you're getting to a point where I think the Death Riders are kind of a little bit of glory hogs, or Jon Moxley's being a little bit of a glory hog, like saying, hey, I'm attached to Will Ospreay, so I'm a little worried about that. But I think he set up Ospreay versus Jon Moxley in the future. But I think that needs to be a match that they have. But to be most appropriate, but I do think that we're getting to a point where Jon Moxley has to be, on the coattails of the success of Will Ospreay. I'm a little worried about that. But overall, it was a really great match. It went a very long duration. I really want to see what grades Dave Meltzer gives us. There's probably like 2 or 3 5-star matches. Even though I don't take his rating seriously, it's always interesting to see what he has to say about it. But overall, it was a really great show. Some of the pros of this show was that I really felt like the women's matches were very strong. That's an issue for AEW. I'm happy that the main event was Will versus Swerve instead of the steel cage match. And I really felt like for $240, I got my money's worth. And then I would say some issues that I didn't like about the show was it was way too long. That's unacceptable to me. The other issue was that I think it was very repetitive, and the formula for AEW is like kick out, kick out, kick out, and something going for a very long time, really. But a majority of the matches felt like that. I don't think the build for Forbidden Door was that good, and I also just felt it was a very predictable show. But I think to me that again, it's like what saves AEW is that the wrestling is leagues better than WWE, really. So I think that that's kind of what makes it stand out, really. But definitely this is a company where they need to have consistent improvements, and I don't think they always will do that or they ever care to do that. But again, I think with every AEW pay-per-view, it's just like this one. It's average to me. It's just you have really great matches, and some of the bill is good and some of the bill is not good. But if I was to give this show a rating, I would definitely say, I would definitely give it like an A-, for everything I talked about. I also want to talk about fan experience. That there was two things that were not good about the show. I think the first thing was, like I said, just say one final time, the show ran too long. The second thing was that they really need to fire who's ever in charge of managing the event, really, because one of the biggest problems with AEW is that they don't turn the cameras on. They don't have monitors so people can know what's going on, really. So there were some times when people were fighting all over the arena. I couldn't see, other people couldn't see, really. And sometimes you get a chance we can't see, really. So they really have to be like, okay, if there's a steel cage match or there's other matches and people are going off the wall and it's crazy and chaotic and everything like that, everybody has to be able to see that, in the audience, really. I'm going to Wembley, but it would be bad if I paid for a seat and they didn't have the other screens just to say, hey, this is what's going on if you sit far away, really. Or even if you sit close to the ring, there's blind spots so when people fall on the ground or fall on the floor or whatever. But yeah, they should have just made it easier for people. All right, guys, I'm about to fall asleep, but I'm happy to review this and put my video together, really. I really am happy that I went. The positive outweighed the negatives with this, and that's all I gotta say.